AAA game companies are now seemingly running out of good ideas, and their solution is to either remake or entirely reboot older game series that had existing fan bases. Recently it's been more of a bad thing, but throughout the years, there have been plenty of times where a series was successfully rebooted, and often even more loved than the original games. Most of these are reboots due to technical limitations, but rarely there are game companies that understand what made the original series so great, and they made sure that the new game has the same core gameplay as the older game. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment if there's a game that we left out. I'm Jay from Keyboard Gaming, and here are some of the greatest game series reboots of all time. GTA 3 is probably one of the most influential games of all time, let alone reboots. Rockstar single-handedly changed the open world genre forever, and they were a pioneer in 3D open world games. The game in itself is over 23 years old at this point, but even older with the original, top-down 2D games from the late 90s. GTA 3 was such a huge leap that it's easy to see why it's so highly regarded today. And now, looking at the GTA 6 trailers, it's easy to forget that the original two games were so basic and dated. Rockstar made history by rebooting with 3, and they might be able to do it again someday if they'd stop trying to repackage GTA 5 every couple of years.
The Zelda games have always been a staple for Nintendo. Their story, game design, mechanics, and just atmosphere were something that no other game could really imitate successfully. The older Zelda games in no way were bad. In fact, most are probably better than a lot of AAA, or I guess I should say quadruple A titles out there now. That doesn't mean that a reboot of the series wasn't in order, and Breath of the Wild was exactly what the series needed to keep people loving the series. Breath of the Wild was way different than previous installments in the franchise. Introducing the massive open world and non-linear gameplay really surprised a lot of people, and some of my friends had beaten the game 3 or 4 times because of how good it was. It really set a new standard for modern Nintendo games and really games in general. Even some games that have recently come out, like Power World or Enshrouded, still utilize elements that were introduced in Breath of the Wild, and that game came out years ago. The Zelda series was already great, and the reboot just made it that much better.
The original Tomb Raider came out back in 1996, and since then, there have been many games in the franchise to release. Before 2013, there were a total of 13 different Tomb Raider games that were all over the place when it came to their stories. There wasn't an overarching story that all the games told. They were more just singular games that stood on their own. But in 2013, Crystal Dynamics wanted to do something new. They rebooted the franchise and planned to have multiple sequels to the game. Their main goal was to create a trilogy, and they have completed that goal back in 2018. When the new Tomb Raider game came out, it was received extremely well and is considered the best Tomb Raider game of all time. It is sitting on Steam with an overwhelmingly positive rating. The sequel wasn't as big as the original, but it did some pretty unique things. Once Shadow of the Tomb Raider released in 2018, that game did amazingly well and was one of the first games to introduce RTX into the gaming ecosystem. It is also my favorite Tomb Raider game. If you haven't played the Tomb Raider trilogy, it is one of those gaming experiences you shouldn't miss out on.
Grace, you read?
The original Wolfenstein game was a lot like the old Doom games. A fake 3D first-person shooter where the gun is somehow transplanted into the middle of the player's chest. The game was actually quite fun for such an old title, but the reboot took things to the next level. The same Bethesda studio that made the Doom reboot also made this game, and the famous Doom composer Mick Gordon composed much of the soundtrack. The reboots are over the top and ridiculous, but you can't deny that they are excellent first-person shooters. The alternate history, post-World War II setting is also a pretty interesting concept in general, and overall the games deliver a unique and polished experience. They're so different than the originals that there's really nothing to compare, and now these games are so well known that most younger gamers don't even know that this is a reboot.
Well done.
The old Battlefront 2 game that was released back in 2005 has still got to be one of the most impressive games to me. Just the sheer amount of content given in that game is insane. I'm still blown away by the fact that in some modes you can literally fight in spaceships, fly into the enemy spaceship, land, and then fight on foot. just crazy, plus the amount of characters that you can play was insane also. It's one of the best Star Wars games to have ever been made. Now, although the new Star Wars Battlefront games may not match up to that level of content and value, they were still super fun and really great reboots of the series. Battlefront 1 and 2 both had their issues, especially at launch, but considering what Battlefront 2 offers now, I'd say they live up to the Star Wars Battlefront name. It's a shame that they stopped making the Battlefront games. I remember so many good times playing the new ones. Regardless of their issues, they were and are amazing games that deserve praise.
When most people think of Doom, they think of the original Doom that came out back in 1993, unless you've played the reboots. The old Doom games are still fun to this day and are enjoyable, but not comparable at all to the newly released Doom games. When looking at Doom 2016, there have been some that argue that it's technically not a reboot. It's technically a spiritual successor to Doom 3, but there was a 12-year gap between the two releases. It does continue the story in the universe of Doom, but you play as a new character in a new location. Plus, the game was called Doom and not Doom 4, so that shows the developers wanted to try and create something new for the franchise. Doom 2016 and Eternal are some of the best games out there because of the insane gameplay, graphics, and soundtrack. The music that this game plays is incredible and immerses you into the game world. We do hope that id Software has a go at a third game for this franchise, because it's some of the most chaotic fun you can have in any game.
Can't you just wear a Raider uniform? It would be pretty effective if you wanted to blend in.
While some of the original Hitman games such as Blood Money were very highly regarded, Hitman Absolution was so lackluster that the future of the series didn't look so good. Thankfully, IO Interactive decided to innovate in the subsequent game, and now we have the Hitman 2016 reboot. This game received quite a bit of controversy by releasing new levels as episodic DLC, but once people got over that, they finally realized how great these new games are. Since the release of Hitman 3, we now have the rebooted Hitman 1, 2, and 3 games all packaged into one. The games themselves were pretty much what fans wanted out of Hitman games, which was open world missions with plenty of assassination options. There are still some people holding on to the nostalgia from the older games, but the reboots have so much more content and are much more refined. With the different difficulty options they provide, the games can be either as easy or as challenging as you want, giving a decent challenge for players of all skill levels. Overall, they're just excellent games in general, and they stand out as one of the best reboots of all time.
Resident Evil. The Resident Evil games are so refreshing. They're some of my favorite horror games of all time, and the older style of Resident Evil games were pretty restricted, not because of the developers or the stories, but because of the technology at the time. The games still hold up today. They're great, but the rebooted games are even better in my opinion. The first rebooted Resident Evil game was Resident Evil 7, which at first almost felt like a complete move in the opposite direction. The game came out as being a first-person game, which the series has always been some form of third person, so this threw people off. In the end though, people loved the game and the story, and it revitalized the franchise. People were pretty disappointed after Resident Evil 6 came out, so this was just what the series needed. Resident Evil 8 was also incredible, and the team is now making remakes of the older games which follow the same feel and look of the new installments. Resident Evil has always been a great series, and the reboots just make it better.
Completely understand. I'll finish later, lad.
The God of War games have been a huge staple for PlayStation and are considered some of the best games that they have ever put out. We've never played the original 3 God of War games, but we know what happens story-wise. We also know about the loyal players who swear by the OG games, and we aren't putting them down in any way when we say that the rebooted God of War games are absolutely incredible. The older games were more linear and had an above-view camera angle. It was more wave-based and played very differently from the new ones. The rebooted games changed everything by making the camera over the shoulder. The combat is also very different because the gameplay is more open. It is a reboot because of the gameplay changes that they made, but it still follows the story of the same Kratos from the original games. God of War 2018 and the newly released Ragnarok are two of our favorite games of all time. I personally have 100%ed both games and can gladly say that it was totally worth it. God of War 2018 is on Steam if you are ever interested in playing it, but unfortunately you will need a PS4 or PS5 to play Ragnarok since they haven't ported it to PC as of this video's release.
I'm sure there are plenty of other games that we left out, and if we did, we'd love to know in the comments. If you did enjoy this video, leave a quick like and subscribe to Keyboard Gaming for more videos just like this. Thanks for watching, we'll see you in the next video.